My third time coming to hardware meetup and sharing. And so I thought I'd start with something that every time actually I've given a presentation I've started with this slide. So my name's Jon Bobrow. I'm the founder and CEO of Move 38. And I don't know, if you haven't read the headline on this yet, take a good... hardware's really hard. And maybe they could have seen that one coming, right? I figured today what I'll do is tell a few stories, specifically about the troubles and struggles and challenges that we've seen. This is our third year as a company, and we're at an exciting point where I feel like I've been building a plane, like mid-flight, and you're like, okay, like the wings will come together. They'll get there. And so this is going to be a little vulnerable, and hopefully some of you can relate to this, and if you can't relate to it yet, maybe you will soon, and I'll leave some time for questions. So today I'm going to focus on 3 lessons, potentially more, specifically around hardware and communication. And so I'm going to start out first with what the heck we do real quickly. We'll get it out of the way. So Move 38 is a new kind of game company. We invented the world's first smart tabletop game system. It functions more reliably than the projector, but we'll talk about how we got there. They're intelligent game pieces. Each of the pieces are artificially intelligent, and they communicate with each other. They respond to touch, and each one has the ability to teach the other pieces how to play a new game. So it's kind of like a Nintendo game cartridge. If your Nintendo game cartridge could teach all of the other cartridges how to play that game and expand and grow. So let's see. So, you know, over the course of 3 years, we've done some things and been recognized, but it's among all this is like a lot of really low. Like this is the stuff that you bring to a investor pitch, and you go, look at how good we're doing. And then like in between is all the like, all right, we're gonna figure this out. We crowdfunded. Last year we raised over nearly 200% of our goal. And we launched the product with 2 games, and it was a game system. And we said we were going to be shipping up to 12 games. And so what I'm not showing here is 200% looks pretty good, and 1,000 people is awesome. That was like the coolest. My goal was build a community of 1,000. But you know, this raised just over $137,000 in capital, which is really good. It was the largest Kickstarter campaign I had ever run. And a year and a half ago, I stood up here and I was like, and I'm going to set the delivery date a year and, I don't know, like 15 months out. Lots of time. People will complain it's not in time for the holiday, but let's give it nice, lots of padding. There are many ways to give yourself padding. Time is one of them. We'll talk about the other ones. We're an ecosystem, and so, you know, we're going to be selling games and then eventually work our way through to more games and more expansions. And so let me start with something that's technical, and then we'll get less technical. So everybody ready for technical stuff? Put on your foil hat. So hardware's really hard. I mentioned that blinks, they communicate with each other. And I think actually, I did actually bring, I think you probably got one.
Yeah, my bag.
I'll grab this. So, it's good to have a sense of scale. So, blinks are these little guys. Yeah, here, you hold the sushi roll. So each one of them, they respond to touch, and you know they're magnetic. They communicate with their neighbors, and so you can see here their guts. When you think of something that's artificially intelligent, you probably wouldn't think something that is like a really weak Arduino, and not a lot of components. There's not a lot going on in there. It also feels like, oh, there's not a lot to get wrong. We have maybe 15 components on the board, and 6 of them are the same on all sides. They're hexagonal. And so the way that blinks communicate with each other, and I'll grab me one more, cool, is that they literally blink back and forth using infrared light. They talk to each other with infrared light, like 2 remote controls. Sounds simple enough. There are a lot of different factors, and I'm going to talk about one specifically. We worked for a year and a half, I don't know, maybe a year, on creating a super reliable way for blinks to work in the kind of environments you would play with blinks. So under household lighting, different types of lighting, on a rainy day. We had run over 100 final engineering prototypes with parts from our supplier. And those parts worked really well. They worked great. In fact, so much so that we could kind of push and pull, and it was like, okay, we've got lots of tolerance on this part. The way they communicate with each other, you can't really see this here though, is that they hold light on for a certain period of time. The light being flashed at the emitter actually discharges at the other emitter, and so they're using binary back and forth to effectively shout at each other. In the process, we went from our 100 engineering prototypes to a pilot run, which, if you haven't thought of these different stages of doing your hardware, I was like, okay, we've got these 100 units, they work just perfectly, we're ready to do our 12,000 units. So, we made some mistakes, one of which is I rushed for an early holiday ship date. We had the boards created for 12,000 units. If you have 6 sides in all your units with 6 of the same parts, that means you've got 72,000 of a part being placed. This part, and I'm just going to kind of skip through this a little bit. This part, our IR communicator, the IR LED, showed up from the people who make it out of spec. So, you know, doing a lot of kind of tests to show like this is how they communicate, this is where they're not communicating, these ones are all good from our initial run, like what's going on here? You start pulling out your microscope, you look at them and you go, I start to see a correlation. Something like this, you put a square in a circle, pretty obvious to see. Over here, seems like something's changed. Felt like a really easy problem to solve. They're like, go to your manufacturer, just tell them these parts are out of spec, and they'll get parts that are in spec. Our lead engineer, who's actually here, Dr. Mather, Josh, he goes, well, you can't just rip off all those parts, because then they'll just put more of those parts, and you don't know if those parts are fixed, right? It's just like, well, they're bad parts, just replace them all. You can't do that. And so we entered a really long, difficult period where we were trying to hunt down what specifically was limiting, like this is not conclusive. It feels conclusive, but we don't know at this point. And so we get a report back from them saying, oh no, that's in spec. And I think, is this the one that has it? This is like this little like red typed in, like, this is our spec. Like, that wasn't published anywhere. We were going off of their data sheet, which is the published spec. We then have them run analyses on sampling of them. This looks pretty good, right? Like they're all kind of similar. They all look like some, you know, it's unfortunate to shape it. The sciences part, so let's see. So I zoom a little bit more, and then you start to notice like, oh, okay, like 65, 50, set, like, oh, interesting, graphs that look alike, but aren't the same, right? So like, This is the real data. This was the spec. And they're like, we're good. We got it. These are great. And so this is really tricky, right? At this point, our manufacturer is in China, and the manufacturer, who's wonderful, is sourcing this part from the place we source it from. They are the truth. They make this part, and asking them to make it to a different standard is tricky. They feel like they're doing their job just right. And so then I need to make some decisions about, okay, how much of my time am I going to spend convincing somebody they're doing their job wrong? Or how much of my time am I going to spend trying to figure out how to work around it, work with it? Life is about compromises, finding how to communicate properly. And so you can tell we've kind of spent a lot of time. When you're testing something, do not fall into the trap of doing tests that look scientific or maybe even are scientific, but don't get you to the end result you need. And so we did like a lot of tests, and the most important thing for me in this process was functional testing. It doesn't matter what the numbers were. It mattered how they worked. People are eventually going to be playing games with them, so we needed to bring them out into settings and use them. And the tests that we sent back to our manufacturers weren't like, hit this high number and this low, this is the threshold. We couldn't do that. You had to say, here, you have to take them apart, put them back together 100 times. You have to arrange them in these different ways. This is how you play the games. If they're working, great. If they're not, we need to keep working on it. And so that was a really tricky thing to communicate to people who are technical and want to say, well, I measured it, and 85 is between 80 and 90. Took me a moment. And say, okay, so that passes. Then eventually, you do need to also kind of follow through on that science, set your, and so I wrote science is hard here. Science is really difficult. I'm not a scientist myself. Creating hypotheses and then proving them out and not like going like, I kind of like, I use duct tape and I pretty much kept it consistent. Like, keeping things very consistent, really important, really difficult to solve things without that kind of consistency. The last thing I wanted to say on this was that at the end of the day, we had to make a really frustrating compromise. And it's, we'll find out how it works, but I think so far it's been working really well. And we've been working with that compromise for 3 months. We opened up our tolerances. We fixed this issue in firmware, and we made it so that out-of-tolerance parts work and in-tolerance parts work. We got past the point of saying, okay, you know what, the parts should be passing on the spec, the contract manufacturer will be ordering parts that pass on the standards that we approved of so that we don't have that issue. However, instead of having to rework 72,000 placements, we got to move forward with more robust firmware. So the second thing I want to talk about, how am I on time? I'll find out, is the second type of communication. Good business is good communication. It seems really obvious, but it's really easy to forget. And so what I mean by that is a couple of things. One of which is Kickstarter. We send updates about once a month. Sometimes they're a little bit quicker, and in the tough times, they're a little bit tougher to send. Don't get caught in that trap. Communicate with people about the things you're struggling with. Believe it or not, they're the things that hook people into what you're building more than the things you're succeeding on. It's far more interesting for me to read an article about how something's going wrong than all the things somebody's doing right. Oftentimes I'm kind of like, I get it, you're doing great. You kind of want to know, what are the mistakes other people are making? It makes you feel more relatable. So this update I wanted to just share as like production updates, New York Toy Fair, game crew review. We start with a new game that we're releasing. We put a video at the top of it. And then a little further down I get to the hard part. And I start quoting Shigeru Miyamoto. And I'm like, a late game is just a late game, but a bad game is always a bad game. And, you know, I'm like, really just like, it'll come, but we're gonna get it right. The audience, like our community, they responded, okay, but then I started to get, some responses that were like, hey, thanks for the update, but, maybe don't carry the bad news. It's kind of nice to show us what you're doing. Like, there was a lot of that, and like, yeah, like, we really appreciate that you're communicating, but like, stay up front. So my next update was like, technical challenges, right? And like, the response to that was super positive. It was like, cool, we're so happy you're working through this, and you haven't given up and just ran with our money. Of course, at the top, I put like a really super fancy GIF, and dress it up, of course. But, let's see. So this is also on the business. So communicate with customers, that's what we were just talking about. Communicate with vendors and partners. So our contract manufacturers, there were things I was really scared to tell them. We're out of money. That's a really difficult conversation to have. We don't have the rest of the money to ship all of the product that we ordered. We placed a PO that we've now spent that money, and we can't finish paying it. That's a really tricky situation to be in. I don't wish that on anybody, and there are many ways to solve that problem, and most of them don't require signing your name in blood, and so that was a really tricky part. I projected, okay, we'll ship at latest in March of this year. We got to a point at the end of last year where I went, I don't have the money to ship this. And I need to focus on selling our other products. I need to focus on contract work. I need to bring money into the company. And so, another way to handle that is maybe pre-sell. It's really tricky to pre-sell something when you're sitting on like, oh, hang tight everybody, it's coming. But it's not, it's not there yet. So, specifically to Alex's point, you gotta ship it. So, communicating with vendors and partners. When I opened up to them and had conversations with them, they were shockingly, like, open ears. Okay, let's figure out how to work through this together. Some people recommended giving them equity. Oh, maybe they'll invest in what you're doing. Okay, that's one possible solution. Deferred payment. If you propose a payment plan, don't go to them and say, I don't know when I can pay. They want to know, like, what do you think is reasonable? Okay, we'd like to aim for this and set your targets. Super tough conversations to have, but the more you communicate, the easier it is. And then communicate with investors. If you're going to take any investment whatsoever, the whole cool thing about investment is the fact that those people specifically know how to help you with capital. Like, you brought them on board to help you with capital. So communicate with them. Show them where you need help. Show them where you did things right, and show them where you did things wrong. The last lesson I wanted to leave on communication. Personal relationships. Nothing without communication. This year was a really difficult year. It was so tough. Ending your year where you're like, okay, I can't pay myself. I was living with my partner of now 7 years as of last year. And she's amazing. Without sharing too much personal detail, the beginning of this year was like, felt like everything was falling apart. Her health went south. And I was floundering, right? I was like, okay, I gotta figure out the company, but like, this is the thing that means the most to me. I'm not gonna lose this. And so, it's my partner. And we adopted a dog 1.5 years ago. It's a horrible decision. If you're a founder of a company, do not adopt a dog, like, right? And so, like, it's an amazing thing, like, talk to me about it. It's one of the best things I ever did. It provided a lot of structure in my life, but you also have a lot of struggle where you're like, wow, I can't believe that like 95% of my time outside of the office is like taking care of a dog, and like maybe I should be pitching and talking at hardware meetups and things like that. So, communication. the last note I want to add here is that as we were going through very difficult times, said, you know what, like, we need help here. We need to open up. We need to be able to communicate about these things. So we started seeing couples therapists. If you have the ability to see a couples therapist and you're in a relationship, if you're thinking about entering into a relationship, it is such an amazing opportunity. I know you didn't think you were coming to Hardware Startup Meetup to hear about couples therapists, but I have to tell you, every single thing in my life, from my personal relationship to my communication with my business partners, to my investors, to my community on Kickstarter, has gotten better because of overcoming certain fears of thinking about what is the other person thinking. That was always my biggest holdup. She's going to be really concerned about this. You don't know. We're not mind readers. And I don't know what my customers know. I have to ask them. And I don't know what my investors are thinking. I have to talk to them. And so the message I wanted to leave you with on this is communication is by far the most difficult thing in the world, whether it be hardware, business, or personal relationships, but I think it's worth everything. So invest in that. This is me. Is that the last thing on there? I think so. All right. Any questions?
So what was your most difficult part, supply chain?
Good question. Supply chain. Know your lead times. Don't act like you know your lead times. Know your lead times. I thought I knew my lead times. Don't go on Octopart and be like, cool, we got this. Talk to your manufacturer. Your manufacturer may not know about Octopart. They might be like, and also Octopart is a great way to hold your manufacturer accountable. What are you talking about? This part's 12 cents. It's on Octopart for 6. I'll order you 1 billion of them. So know your lead time. Supply chain, I mentioned we're 15 components, so we don't really, a dozen of them are repeats. We don't have a lot of supply chain issues so much, but I do have to say, that's the most important thing. No lead times. Our manufacturer quoted us 141 days for one of our parts, and I was just like, I have no idea why that makes sense. We're on Octopart, I can order them right now, and even if they're out of them, they say they'll get them back in 7 weeks. So that doesn't add up. I would say with supply chain, just do your own research, talk to your manufacturer, share your research with them.
We have a couple women in hardware in the audience. I'd love to hear from any of you if you have questions. Not putting you on the spot. Or whoever has a question.
Or gender fluid, go for it. Everybody. Yeah.
So not necessarily a question. I represent a contract manufacturer in New Jersey, and the openness of you communicating financial troubles with your manufacturer, just want to commend you on that. So we deal with startups and big Fortune 500 companies every day. Sometimes I think the larger companies are more afraid to talk to me and go radio silent. And the startups tell me, hey, I think 6 more weeks till I can pay you, or 8 more weeks till I can pay you. And the communication is all, as a CF, I'll tell you guys, is all we want. Just knowing where you guys stand is what's most important to us. The open communication, we appreciate that.
Yeah,
now, I'm sure the best secret at Octopart, as a CM, keep that between you.
That's like when you walk into a bookstore and you pull out your Amazon barcode scanner and you're like, sorry, order this from home. Support your brick and mortar. They're struggling.
Yeah, I think I remember your product at Maker Fair, and it stood out, and I thought it was really cool. So we want so much a question, but just really kind of props, really awesome stuff.
Thank you so much. I'll finish with an ask, by the way. I have one, but I'm going to hang on to it till the end.
You mentioned that you allowed a lot of lead time with the Kickstarter campaign, or you allowed for kind of a longer period as a cushion. You seem to allude to the fact that maybe you wouldn't have done that if you did that. And then you also said something about like other ways to create cushion, so curious what.
Yes, thank you for catching me on that. I did allude to that and I never followed up on it. So, time is one bit of cushion. Things take time. But the thing that I was alluding to is that things also take money. So most likely you're paying rent, you're feeding yourself. And like, even if you're working for free for your company, you need to check that your finances support this. Okay. So that was the hurdle that I ran into specifically, was that I didn't budget it appropriately. I didn't budget in time. I had some interns that came in and they worked on games. And, 2 months ago I actually started paying 2 people in the office, which feels amazing. And but I have to tell you, it took like a year of like wrapping my head around how to get past that hurdle. And so there's time, there's money. I would say those two are, one can speed up the other, but also note that like, VC world is like, money speeds up everything. And it's like, but it also speeds up mistakes. Like, had we shipped those 12,000 units, we would have been dead. We just would have, like, those would have shipped, and I would have been like, I can't believe you guys got it done so quickly. 3 months early, your Kickstarter arrived 3 months early. And everyone would have been like, they suck. That would have been the nail in the coffin for us. So I would say, definitely build in a buffer. On those 4 Kickstarters I've done, this is the latest I've ever been to deliver a Kickstarter. We said we'd be March of this year. They arrived stateside on Sunday, and we're shipping them on Wednesday. And we've got, pallets arriving and everything. Like, we got to refine every little detail in the process. We built game instructions and illustrated them and shot videos, and like, the whole experience just went. So, build in time, but budget your project out. And if you're really smart about it, make a parametric model of your budget so you know what it looks like when you are doing really well, and you know the worst case scenario. If you're not in between those two, call me up and we'll have a tea and cry about it.
And refer a therapist.
And refer a therapist. I know a great one.
Hey there. So it sounds like you big hurdle with the performance of these components, and I know, having learned the hard way myself, is this whole kind of functional testing, which you also mentioned. You talked a little bit about what you started with and what you ended with in terms of both component level testing, board level testing, functional testing, etc. Just from a holistic standpoint, a lot of people may not be aware of that.
Yeah, so I'll add one note. We're using a component in an interesting way. So LEDs are typically meant to emit, and we're using LEDs to emit and receive. So good luck trying to get a manufacturer to support something the product was not technically designed to do. I didn't want to go down that road. For testing, so currently for the initial run, which is a relatively small run, right? We're in thousands of units, not hundreds of thousands of units. The tests are functional on the side of the manufacturer. So they have somebody pull a certain amount of side, and they play games, and they make sure that they communicate properly. We've created something that is game-like, that gives us all the information you need to know about the gameplay, so that they don't have to play all 12 games, or next year we're going to release the next 12 games in the first half of the year. So they're not going to need to be playing games. But it's a functional test. We do have data on specifically the range we need to be for measuring that. However, I didn't want to sign off on that, at least not yet. We're going to get this first batch out. Surely there are going to be some, deaths. We'll see where those thresholds are again. And really kind of waiting as long as possible to set those tests in a way that don't measure the thing we need to measure, right? Like, the correlation has to be super high, where you're like, even though I'm just getting a number, that equals 99.99% confidence that it's functional. Does that help answer your question? And then I can also point out, like, there's a bunch of test points on our board. I think if you like test probes, those don't do anything for us. They like were useful for the manufacturer. They were like, okay, we want to measure these things. But like for us, we're like, actually, like the most important thing is, can you just move the pieces around and make sure they communicate properly?
So that you did do board level, component level board level, and then the final assembly test at the end.
Yeah, so our components and boards are so cheap, and Josh, maybe you can hop in on this, but like testing the parts ahead of time is pretty expensive depending on what you're doing. And so it seems like, I can report back on this later, but it seems like at this point, it actually makes more sense for us to place them, find the bad ones, pull them aside, and then, you know, filter at the end. Oftentimes you will want to filter parts in the beginning. If you're making a $2,000 bed, you probably want to filter those parts in the beginning. Is that a fair assessment?
We're going to actually have to wrap now, get over to the next speaker, but feel free to connect afterwards.
Yeah, and my last ask is if anybody's looking for a fun time to hang out on Wednesday night, join us. We'll be shipping out 2,000 sets, and the games are pretty fun. So, thanks so much.
Thank you.